and I'll tell this to others if they show up, that I put the readings in the modules, the links to the readings are in the module if you do need them because you have the other textbook that was incorrect, that I did make sure to put that in the module too. And there are also, I think, a few videos as well. I know some of them are older videos, and then I did put a new video for the story Lucis Naturae. That's a YouTube with some scholars talking about it too, just for extra commentary too to help with that. Today we're really just going to focus on the assignments in Arabic, and then we'll go over birthmark some as well. I'll probably just go over an overview of Lucis Naturae, but since next week, that's when the assignment for the Lucis Naturae, and then there's, I think, a quiz on birthmark. So I want to spend the most time on Arabic because there's a writing assignment, I think a quiz on Arabic as well. And so that reading starts on page 284 about James Joyce. And I want to go ahead and share my screen. Can you see my screen? The Blackboard screen?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
Okay. Okay, so for week 4, so what I did was if you do need the extra reading, I just put here are the pages in the Perrines literature to read, and I put the readings at the bottom. So for this week, I put the readings if you need them at the bottom here. Do you have the Norton book or the Perrines literature?
I have the Norton textbook.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because some students went to the bookstore and they accidentally ordered the old textbook that we used to have, which was Perrines. So that's why I put the readings, because some of the readings that we are reading now are not in that textbook. So if you do just need an extra reading, like if you misplaced your book or something, that it's right there to view too. If you need to read it, these are just some old recordings on Arabic and the birthmark. And then I thought I added, maybe I need to add the video because I probably put the video, I might have put the video in the other modules, week 5. I know I put an extra commentary on, maybe you did not. I might need to actually move it to this one because I did find a YouTube that was helpful just for extra commentary. Yeah, this video here, I'll move that one as well because I just think it's helpful to have just some extra commentary. It's a short story, but just to hear other scholars talk about the reading, I think that will definitely help. So I'm gonna make sure that I'll just put it in the module for week 4 here. Hi, Ava. How are you doing today?
Oh, okay. I'm good. How are you?
Good. So right now I'm just making sure that one of the classes has. So we're going to go over the module for week 4, and really we're going to focus the most on Arabic today because of the writing assignment. And then we'll also go over birthmark 2. Because for week 4 there's Arabic and birthmark. So we'll focus the most on those, and then I'll just kind of go over an overview of Lucis Naturae. That's a new story that I added, and we'll probably spend the most time on that next class, because if you don't finish some of the readings this week, you can finish birthmark and Naturae next week. You do need to read well, you need to read Birthmark really well enough to write on it, but yeah, just in case you do need to finish it or just reread Birthmark, or we're going to finish going over that in more detail next class. But let's try to see the video. I posted a video on the Lucis Naturae. That's a new story that I added, and there's PowerPoints for all. I put up PowerPoints for all 3 readings on Birthmark, Araby, and Lucis Naturae by Margaret Atwood. And these are just old recordings. I only have old recordings on Araby and Birthmark because I had the Lucis Naturae as a new story, but I did put an extra just video commentary in the module. And so just looking at the assignments here, I went through and actually straightened out through week 5 because we do have a paper coming up. But let's see, the paper is see where the paper is due. There's the peer revision, and essay 1 is due February 17th. So and we'll just have to see if it needs to be extended a day or 2. But I realized that the peer revision, I think I had 2 different dates for that. So this week we're not doing the peer revision because we're doing the readings, and then next week we'll work on the peer revision and the visual literary analysis on Barn Burning. That will be due February 17th. This week we're working on these readings. Actually, we're on week 4, so this is 2 weeks out that the paper on the short story will be due. Like I said, if I feel like it needs to be maybe moved a day or 2, then we'll, that's fine. But you'll write about the barn burning. It's a visual literary analysis, so just really focusing on symbolic imagery in the text. And so that's basically what that will be about for the first main paper. For this week, if you have Perrings literature, I did put the readings in the module. Even if you have the Norton, if you're somehow away from your textbook, it is online if you do need it. So these are the readings, and so these are the PowerPoints and the old videos. There is a quiz on Araby. I did post a video that may help too to give context for the story. There is a video grammar quiz. I watched the video. Some of these were kind of longer grammar videos, so some of them I did just watch them to a point, and then it came up with questions based on the video. But I just watched the video because it goes over the grammar rules, and so whatever is in the quiz it pertains to that video. So that'll it's just a basic grammar review. And then there are, let's see, there's supposed to be 2 writing assignments, or I just have the visual analysis on Araby. Let me make sure. Let me go back and look at this. So it looked like that I had 2 writing assignments, and maybe I meant to take that one off. So the paragraph on Arte and phenomenalism. Let me make sure that's not another. If anything, I'll just take it off, and you'll just have the one writing to do. Actually, I think I put it. Okay, I put it in this. Let me see what due date I had for this. I'm sorry about that. Okay, let's see. I thought I had both of these in here. What due date? So I put the 8th. And so that would be, let's see. Okay, that would still be, that would be next week. I'll just change it to make, I'll just change that. I'm sorry about that one. Some of the assignments were copied from previous semesters and trying to sort through all of it, and I added a couple of new things. So what I'll do is I will fix that, and we'll just do that next week. The birthmark of February 8th. To not be confusing, and then you'll just do the paragraph on Araby, the grammar quiz. And then there's a weekly discussion due February 4th, and a quiz due on the reading Araby. So I'll just put this week 5. see. So you will have 2 paragraphs on Mrs. Naturae, and then the one on birthmark. If you want to go ahead and work on them, you can. Actually, I have not made the quiz yet. Well, I probably do. So we'll probably do just the short quiz. I may make like a 5 or 6 question quiz. I actually have not made that yet on the reading, so I will do that. And then I did have the discussion on how to revise. That's just I just asked a general question about your thoughts on outlining for the writing process. There's a video on outlining, and then there's a video quiz on what is revision. So that's just, these 2 are just on how to write, and then there's a quiz on birthmark. Okay, so I'm sorry about that. This good thing that I checked that. So that won't be due until the next week for the birthmark. So really, like I said, we'll just focus the most on Araby, and then I will talk about birthmark some, because the discussion for this week is about the discussion for week, because this is week 4. It is on birthmark. So the discussion, I'll show you the discussion. I did use the textbook, the Norton textbook, to kind of make some of the questions here. So like, for example, you just choose, you watch the video that's on TED here. It's by TED, and it's on symbols and brands, and based on how it impacts our humanity. So you could just write about, would it make a difference if Georgina's cheek were shaped like a fish, a heart, or a regular oval? So that kind of comes from part of number 1 on page 378 of your textbook. And then the other question you could answer, just choose one, is can the mark be seen as a symbol of unification of the power of human nature? Can you see the mark as a logo or an example of a brand in our world today? If so, how? You may make a slogan or saying of a brand based on a depiction of the symbol. And then option B, use the images below to explain how the mark represents Georgina's identity as it creates her self-expressiveness. So let me make sure. That this one is, yeah, this is, because I had to rework the discussion board some. So actually that for the option B, that this is just multiple choices for you to write about. If you don't want to answer these 2, then you could answer, this would be number 1 for letter B. Does the mark appear red, more visible, or faint? And then just connecting it to political ideology too, the symbolism. And that's basically all that you do for this assignment for the discussion for this week. So you do need to read the birthmark to know how to answer the discussion, and basically that's on the symbolism of the birthmark. And we'll talk about that in more detail. I just want to go through that. And then, so for the writing assignment, I did go ahead and put the video, the commentary on Mrs. Naturae, if you want to go ahead and watch that. But let's just look at, we'll talk about Araby a lot here and sense perception. So on page 284 of your textbook, so your text starts with an overview of who James Joyce is, and he wrote Dubliners, and so some of you may have heard of the Dubliners or have read that before. Have any of y'all heard of or read Dubliners before, or part of it?
I have not.
Okay. So basically that he is, he's an Irish writer. And so eventually though he left Ireland for Paris, returning a year later. And really his most famous work is Dubliners. And so that's basically a story. So it's a text, but it's a compilation of stories. And basically they have different narrators and different plots in them. And so this particular story here, Araby, is about a boy, an unnamed narrator, and basically that it's a story of self-discovery and coming of age, because essentially that he just basically really focuses on human nature in this, and the world of a young boy, and what it hinges on, and that's basically the ideology we see in this is pertaining to the boy. We do see, cultural values and aesthetics as something important too, and religious beliefs. So those all tie into the cultural values, capitalistic values, based on the ending, especially when he travels all that way to go to the bazaar, and then he's so disappointed. But you could see other important ideologies, like whether it's political ideologies, economic ideologies, um, and basically, um, and individualist ideologies too, because the youth, he does what he wants to do. So he definitely represents individualism, because in the end, he's so wrapped up in his own world, and so he really emphasizes the power of the imagination in the story. And that is something that's like a romantic quality that we see. And this was written in 1914. So you could even see that maybe he's even looking back at the Romanticists from the 1800s, and maybe even sort of using that as a basis and a critique for some of their views, because they really elevated the imagination and youth. They celebrated youth and the imagination, and also they had an awe of nature. And there is, the supernatural, um, the supernatural nature of Araby and the Eastern enchantment, the mysticism that draws them in. So we see this awe of the supernatural, and basically that we see kind of just how outlandish that is, and basically even just like a cultural critique on looking at how elaborate that Eastern enchantment is, and that bazaar, and basically the celebration of materialism and wealth and things like that are just issues that you see. I know there's some articles I found that go into a lot of the cultural ideologies pertaining to things outside of just the narrator's inner world that you see in this, that pertain to economic and political ideologies tied to the work. That's not something you think of when you read this at all, because you're just thinking that this is just a story about this young boy, and basically that how his world is essentially shattered when he does not get to experience a reality that he wanted to experience, and he's just utterly earth shaken in the end. In the end, he does come to self-realization that that basically it's a process of him having to learn that what reality is like. So we definitely see realism, and that was an 18 concept from the 1800s too, because at the beginning we see a lot of idealism, with his imagination and his love for Mengen's sister, and how everything is so idealized in his mind. And then at the end, he sees what reality for what it really is, and things don't always work out as we want them to. And you could argue that he at least comes to some sort of self-awareness um, of his own selfishness too. That's a question for you to I guess ask yourself, do you think that he ever kind of comes to that understanding? But in the end, it's a bittersweet moment, because he has some sort of awareness that this is he's got to learn to grow up and to be more mature. So it's definitely a maturation process as well. And so, love and disillusionment are definitely, central themes. And like I said, it is a journey of self-discovery for him. And like I said, that some scholars do focus on how there are some traits of romanticism in it. That this romanticism of the church and life is really shown in this, and basically, the boy though, he's trying to challenge authority in this. He does not want to be in school, and he doesn't want to follow the religious rules in his house either. Um, and so we see basically that in the text that, for instance, he says, I chafed against the work of school. So basically, he says, and this is just your typical of most young adolescents and at this age. And then you see that he doesn't like school. And then, when he's called to come downstairs and home, that basically that, Miss Mercer, she's wanting him to honor the Lord's day and night and not go out, but of course that he ends up leaving. And so basically, he challenges all the authority that there is, because of his love for Megan's sister. And we see that she is actually more interested in religious things, while he's more wrapped up in the material things in this life. That basically on page 286 it says, while she spoke, she turned a silver bracelet around her wrist. She could not go, she said, because there would be a retreat. And so if you look at the footnote at the bottom, so make sure to read the footnotes too. It's a period of withdrawal dedicated to prayer and religious study. So she's going to go and practice her faith, but he is still believing that if he can go and get her a treasure from going to this bazaar, that she will love him as much as he loves her. And basically that, the details are really important. Like when we looked at Faulkner's barn burning, that there's a lot of really good details that you can look at, the symbolic imagery in this, even the light from the lamp that caught the white curve of her neck, lit her up her hair that rested there, falling, lit up the hand upon the railing. So basically that she's basically, appearing like a surreal image to him, kind of like a heavenly image. And basically that he is, he's basically caught in between his love of her, knowing that she is actually more dedicated to another calling in life, but he can't come to terms with that reality. And she to him, looks like an angel or something divine. But he and basically he believes, he just has to win her over like any other young man would. And basically that he just essentially decides that, he's got to go to this bazaar and find her something. But what the irony is, there's a lot of irony here, but we do see, besides the fact that he isolates himself from his friends. So when you look at the very bottom of 286 to 287, he's so wrapped up in his own world, his own imagination, his own microcosm, so to speak, in his own inner world, that it says at the bottom, from the front window, I saw my companions playing below in the street. Their cries reached me, weakened and indistinct, and you see that even with the diction in this, that and is repeated twice, and with good grammar, that actually we would not use and twice in a sentence because it's incorrect. But as an author, that of course they can do whatever they want to with grammar and write as they want to. So basically that he's adding the extra ands to emphasize these things here. And leaning my forehead against the cool glass, I looked over at the dark house where she lived. So basically that, he's looking at his friends below and then seeing this dark house where she lived. So, basically that it's representing, you could say symbolically, the darkness of his mindset, because he's so consumed with his obsession with this young girl. And her house looks dark because that he's so fixated on just winning her over and that status, if he could, possibly court her, date her, and then while his friends, they're all down below having fun and and enjoying life, that he's just in this doom and gloom, that he's got to isolate himself, and he's got to be able to do this so that he can um, basically make his imagination a reality. So his main conflict is he's stuck in an idealist view of life and believing that everything revolves around him, and then he comes to awareness that the world does not revolve around him at the end of the story. That's why it's a good coming of age story. And basically that that, like I said, that he doesn't want to observe um a Sunday night for their faith, their Catholic faith. So they're Irish Catholics. So that would be probably why the light is emphasized on the young girl too, because the color white, and basically that we see toward the end that there is some surreal imagery when he's leaving to go to Araby. When he is leaving by himself, he strode down Buckingham Street towards the station, and then you see this really good depiction here of ruinous houses over the twinkling river. So, like I said, there's a lot of surrealism here too, because that he lives in this ideal state, he makes note of things that appear to be supernatural or idyllic in nature, and then but the thing is, he contrasts, the ruinous houses over the twinkling river. So everything's like there's a dichotomy, so to speak, that, and light and dark are, looking through the light glass, the light, he's probably looking outside of the light through the glass, and then he sees the dark house. And so it's, there's light and darkness in his mind because he's battling over how to perceive reality. So that sensory perception is really important here. And there's an Enlightenment philosophy called empiricism. And so basically the empiricists believe that basically that the only way to know truth is through sensory experience. So it has to be experience. So it is a theory that all knowledge is derived from sense experience. And so you could definitely see that he's having to, he has to describe everything in such detail and actually see and experience things. Like he had to have the experience of going to the bazaar to truly find out about love and life, that it had to be experienced. He couldn't just stay at home, and because he knew that Megan's sister wasn't going to go, one of his schoolmates, his sister that he likes, like he was, the one he wanted to court. And so that, basically in the end, he in that this notion of realism. And so, by 1914, especially with, we're looking at modernism, that realism was a real thing. That was definitely one of the most important traits of modernism is, realism, because they focused on the harshness of reality. So we see here that, as a modernist, he's critiquing, other ways of looking at life, even before the 1800s in literature, especially because, back in the, Renaissance time, 1600s, though that there was all different types of literary works written, there was tragedies, there was comedies, but there were some rather idyllic and unrealistic stories, more so that were shown. For example, even in your textbook, there's a Midsummer Night's Dream by Shakespeare, and that one has fairies in it and it has magic in it. It's not realistic at all. And basically that with this story, that we see his imagination as it is running the story until the end, when he realizes that this is what the world's like, that when you get out and see what commerce is like, that even people waiting on you are not going to really pay that close attention or really care even. So basically that he has to come to terms with the fact that this is what reality is, and that they're basically to come to terms with the fact that there are other people besides his own inner ambitions, and other people's input on those things. They do matter, which, of course, he did not think that Miss Mercer's input or, even going to school is worthwhile. But in the end, because we see on 288 that the paragraph here is the fourth, it's the third paragraph. So we see that his inner thoughts here is stream of consciousness observing me, the young lady came over and asked me, did I wish to buy anything? The tone of her voice was not encouraging. She seemed to have spoken to me out of a sense of duty. So that phrase, sense of duty, that, it is really important there because, he's realizing, hey, not everyone is actually going to genuinely want to, be friends with me or get to know me. And then he said, and then it says, I looked humbly at the great jars that stood like Eastern guards at either side of the dark entrance to the stall and murmured, no, thank you. And then the very last line reads, gazing up into the darkness, I saw myself as a creature driven and derided by vanity, and my eyes burned with black anguish and anger. So definitely in the end that we see that, he's coming to terms with the fact of his, that he, experienced, folly by believing so intensely that everyone in his ideal world, that he was so fixated on this one girl that he believed would like him, that everyone must like him. Essentially, that same mentality applied to everything and everyone. And then he realized that that's not how the world is, and that he really was just being vain and selfish. And so we do see, if you I'm thinking in the PowerPoint, I put some things about religion too, and the deadly sins, because that's what he struggles with. Is there's the 7 deadly sins, and vanity is one of them, especially with the Catholic faith and everything. That we do see that there is pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, sloth, and so we definitely see he struggles with pride and greed, and then some of the others too, envy, and whatnot. So he struggled with some of these deadly sins in this, and that's what is running his inner world. But we do see that it's like, with that imagery of the darkness here, so that the dichotomy light and dark, good and evil, goes into the darkness. He finds some introspection. So when you look at philosophers like Socrates that really focus on the self-examined life, that you could definitely see some Socratic views, that he's finally coming to some self-awareness, that he's got to look inside himself and really be able to discern what truth is, and basically that with that that self-examination, that basically Socrates said that he would teach people to examine their beliefs, assumptions, values, emotions, and attitudes on a regular basis and relentlessly. And so that's what we do see here. Though it's a modernist story, we do see there's some fragmentation. The fragmented worldview revolving around the fact that, wait a minute, the world doesn't revolve around him. That there is in the end some classicism, so to speak, because he goes back to the self-examined life that was promoted by Socrates, and also religious ideology, the knowledge and awareness of the sins, and the need for self-correction in their faith. And so that's just kind of an overview. Let's go ahead and just take a look at the creative analysis on visual imagery. So with this, it's write 2 8 to 10 sentence paragraphs. And if you don't, let's say I just put, let's say, because there's 6, I have 6 sentences. I'll say that if you have around 6 to 8 sentence paragraphs, because I do have 6 points here, and I try to be as thorough as I can with instructions so that you kind of know step by step what should be And this, as long as like I said, there's one citation per paragraph. That's all that you need. And so there's one paragraph on a visual analysis that will kind of help prepare you for the big assignment later, and that's to state a topic sentence that describes how Joyce uses visual imagery as a guiding force for the plot. This may be a rhetorical question, an anecdote, and then describe the background context. And then you basically describe the title, the genre. We didn't look at the genre that much, so let's go back. Let's look at the PowerPoint here too. And just look at the PowerPoint structure. Okay, so with this story, and I did focus a lot on realism, and then there's some things about setting and basically the plot structure, setting, place. So we have in literature, we focus on setting, we focus on plot, and we focus on the exposition. Tone and mood are really important too, to look for. Let's see, the genre. I put a slide on that. Okay, I put a modernist interpretation, stream of consciousness, and aesthetics. So reduce that unattainable beauty is something that stands out to you in this. And the spirituality and mysticism and idealism, that's definitely seen. We see the Catholic faith, and also just that enchantment of Araby, on realization, narcissism, and so basically that, like I said, that when you look at the story, that you are looking for those central main points. So Araby, that it's just a coming of age story. It's a short story. It's told from the first person, from the I point of view. What do you call the first person? So that is something to make note of. So you can make note of those things as a coming of age story. It's by James Joyce. It's written in 1914. Those types of things. Then it's data claim that ignites an analysis of the visual imagery. And then, so there's, like I said, there's a lot of good visual imagery, and you have that, even the dichotomy of the light and the dark. It's sort of like Faulkner, because there's a lot of emphasis on how things appear, and that has a lot of symbolic meaning. You could focus on the antique imagery in the setting, imagery that paints Araby as a place of mythos, or any of those types of things. His love interest, that imagery that we read. Cite an example from the text, and then you want to lead into the quote and cite Joyce in the page. Then explain how the visual imagery is used to create the narrator's inner world or microcosm through his perception. And then explain how his view of love changes in at least one or two sentences too. And then you just conclude by summing up the main point. And then the next paragraph is state a topic sentence that transitions from the main idea in the last paragraph, based on the purpose of visual imagery in the work, to a point that describes the essence of sensory perception in the work. Then describe the background context that emphasizes the narrator's identity, ego, and self-awareness. State a claim that described how and why Joyce presents contrasting views of the definition of isolation and love through an emphasis on colors, sights, sounds, and textures, and smells to lead the narrator on the path to Araby. And then cite an example from the text, and then analyze the citation. Explain whether you believe the narrator is entirely guided by sense perception or empiricism, or whether you believe he does use his own rational logic. So that's just more focusing on the Enlightenment thought here. You could still argue that he does make decisions for himself using what he believes to be rational logic. He's not just bolting out of the house without even asking Miss Mercer or anything like that, based on something he saw or smelt or anything else that could have made him do that. So, but that we do know that a lot of it is he is guided. You could argue that he is guided by his perception of things, his perception of Megan's sister, like she seems to be an ethereal person to him, like not even very realistic, and representing the unattainable. And that represents his state of mind. And basically that and his perceptions of the isolation from his friends, that they're so far in the background in that one setting there, and then he looks at her house and it's dark. So all those things seem to really, how he perceives things and experiences things takes him on that journey. And if he had been in a more rational state, arguably, he might not even decide to go to that. He might have said, he might have said he had other things to do, or better things to do. If he had been thinking differently about the perceptions and all the sensory details around him that he was seeing, that the story might have actually taken a different turn, possibly. So that's one reason why I put that. And then you just conclude some things. Also, I wanted to go over with the Dubliners, that I know that there are themes like paralysis in this story, that is basically that the boy in Araby is paralyzed by his obsessive love for his friend Megan's sister, to the point where he hallucinates her in the back of hall of a home, and he goes to the bazaar in search of a gift for her and leaves with the realization that his fantasy is both childish and arrogant. And so basically that that there's paralysis, and so that is a common theme in Joyce's works, is paralysis, and basically that that that's like I said, it's an important concept. And even there is some sense of animism in this text too, which is something we'll talk about with Sylvia Plath's poem Daddy. That animism is the belief that objects, places, and creatures are all possess a distinct spiritual essence. And we kind of see that in this too, because of the sensory perception. For instance, we see the animistic charge invested in the face of the houses manifests as continuity in the hostile aspect of the cafe. So you just basically that we see some awareness of that in the story, based on how he perceives even the houses in the story. That makes it rather unique to and we see how the story just illustrates the manner in which Joyce integrates the pattern of action with intricate symbolism of his Catholic background. So just looking at how he could have even based it on some of his own maybe personal experience, that he made it into a fiction story. For all we know, we don't really know, but he does have some of his background that he used to write it. And basically that there's a lot of spiritual inertia for the church in it, and then even the priest, from the boy prowls in the empty residence that formerly belonged to a now deceased priest. He is oppressed by its musty atmosphere. That's why I say with animism, it's like the house and the way he looks at the houses. It's almost like those objects have a spiritual essence about them. That's kind of it makes it more suspenseful too. And so that's something to make note of in that context also. All right. And then we'll just, I guess, let's see, it is 8:43. So with birthmark, I'm just going to go over a little bit of birthmark too, because that's part of the discussion. And lusus naturae, so birthmark and lusus naturae are very similar because they're both about women. Lusus naturae is a more extreme version of birth. Well, they're both pretty extreme, but I would consider lusus naturae a very extreme version of birthmark, even though birthmark is, it's definitely a different type of story. And in this, we see how Nathaniel Hawthorne, that he has, so basically he's known as a great American author. He has a lot of moral themes, but he's not actually tied to any sort of particular religion, but his works have extremely moral themes. So with this particular story, that he is actually going and critiquing some philosophers from the past, because Almer, he is a pseudoscientist, so to speak, and he believes he can basically create this magic potion that could cause immortality. And he has his own secret laboratory that his wife Georgina doesn't know about. And essentially, that though it talks about all the philosophies that he uses, some of them are, when you go back and look at the Enlightenment thought, that it's like he's critiquing a lot of those Enlightenment philosophers and other philosophers too from years back, and some of their faulty views of things, and kind of just pointing that out in the story. And with this, we just see the nature of appearance versus reality, something really strong, because at the beginning of the story, their marriage, you couldn't say anything was wrong with it. The way that their marriage was described is that Georgina actually inspired him. His love for his young wife might prove the stronger of the two, but it could only be by intertwining itself with his love of science. So it's believed that she inspired him to be a better scientist. The next page here, that was 366, 367, that we learn that essentially that she has this defect, so to speak, and it talks about the men that she used to court because she's a really beautiful woman. Some of them didn't notice the birthmark on her face is shaped like a hand, while others did. And then finally, we come to the self-discovery that, and through the eyes of Georgina, that her husband doesn't like the birthmark, and she had no awareness that her husband didn't like that. And so with Hawthorne, if you've ever read The Scarlet Letter, there's the same theme here, because the birthmark is known as, on page 368, the symbol of his wife's liability to sin, sorrow, decay, and death. And so we see the alliteration decay and death, sin and sorrow, because it's emphasizing to him that it represents sin. And so we that's why with the discussion, we're really looking at, how superficial it is to look at things like that, because by saying a tiny defect on someone is representing of something wrong that they did and they were born like that, that is that really just to say, that is that really correct to say that? Why would actually anyone want to think that, much less, that just looking at the ethical nature of that, unless that she was actually doing something that was morally incorrect in the story, which she did not until she accepted her husband's quest to try to create this potion that would bring about immortality, and she ends up passing away from that, because the birthmark is part of her identity. And basically when he tries to remove it, that she passes away. And as I was reading this story for the first time, I had like this feeling that she was going to pass away, because it's actually part of who she was. That's her, it made her different. It made her stand out. It made her a unique person, though it was a mark, but it was still part of who she was. And maybe reflected even her personality, that she now, even back then, that they would actually paint on little birthmarks on their face, because it had to do with the coquette culture or things like that. She did have a lot of suitors because she was beautiful. So basically, that it just kind of shows even the ridiculousness of some beauty trends, and especially when they connect it to looking at one's inner conscience connected to something like that as a mark of sin. And that's the same thing with the story, the Scarlet Letter, that she wears an A because for adultery, but that was actually something that she did that was immoral. But the ethics of that story, that he was exposing flaws with Puritanism, that he actually did not agree with Puritanism, and that they were that some of their practices he did not believe were ethical. And that story does show how that that the way they treated the woman, even though she did sin, it was really ridiculous what happens to her in that story. If you read that story or if you've seen the movie to it, it just exposes that particular religion, and it shows kind of how hypocritical it was. I believe that the preacher in it, and this doesn't have to do with the story, but there's some similarities here, except for the fact that for the adultery, that's something she actually did. In this story, that the birthmark, that's not something she actually had any say in. And the end, you can see that hand maybe representing that Almer was trying to take the place of a creator, because he was trying to put his hand into something that like life and death and immortality, and she ends up going along with that. So in the end, it could represent that as the moral wrong, was she going along with him wanting to remove the mark in an unnatural way. And it's just really, when you look at the story, that we see he's really critiquing a lot of classicism, and obviously exposing some philosophies as being pseudoscientific. And in the end, the story basically tells us what to believe about Almer. So there's some direct characterization here, when that means that the author is telling us what they think about Almer in the end. It says, yet had Almer reached a profounder wisdom, he need not thus have flung away the happiness with which would have woven his mortal life of the self same texture with the celestial. The momentary circumstance was too strong for him. He failed to look beyond the shadowy scope of time, and living once for all in eternity, to find the perfect future in the present. So he's so obsessed with perfection. And with the Greek people, that they did believe in arete, which is a form of perfection or excellence. The way Almer goes about that, though, it is pretty much even just a critique of some classicism that we see, and Enlightenment thought. And we'll go over this in a lot more detail next week. And I'm just going to go over an overview of Lucis Naturae too. So in this story, it's by Margaret Atwood. She's another famous modernist, American author, and like Nathaniel Hawthorne. And in this story, like I said, it's just sort of similar in that they're both about women that have some sort of defect. In this story, there's a young girl, and like the same thing with some of the religious mysticism, there's things that go on here that are unusual in the family, that just make you question the family in the story too, because you read it that it's definitely questionable. That essentially there's a girl in the story that she is seen as beautiful and innocent, to the depiction of perfection, but then she basically has this, they find out she has a disease, and it's called Porphyria's disease. But her, looking at even page 259, we see that essentially that the grandmother puts her head in I believe it's dirty dishwater, I believe. Make sure, because I know it's on page 259. Yeah, once she'd held my hand in the water, in which not dirty dishes, but dirty clothes, excuse me, dirty clothes were soaking, praying while she did it. So she actually put her head in dirty water where clothing had been, basically dirty clothes water, and holds her head under it, thinking that she can eject an evil spirit from her. So once again, we see this mysticism, or religious, sort of pseudo-religious beliefs there too, because that's just, if you think about that nowadays, that just wouldn't be, putting someone's life in jeopardy, and believing that's going to fix it. That's just not the way to logically and ethically go about that. So, like, so there's superstition in it, with even the way the grandmother treats the situation. There's basically that we see superstition with how they treat her. Once that the doctor says that she has this disease, and he calls it lusus naturae, and basically that, when you look at that, the way that he talks to them, he says it's Latin like a monster. So the fact that the doctor says that, though it's a Latin word, he basically is calling her a monster, and that's essentially what she becomes. Instead of dismissing that doctor, which they did dismiss him, and he said it's nobody's fault either. Instead of dismissing that doctor, then they just basically treat her like she is deceased, but she's still alive. And so it's just becomes a very creepy story when you see how they essentially pretend to have this fake burial for her. She ends up basically living in, in a room, in a gown, like a wedding gown, and then and it talks about, that the neighbors believed that she had died in a saintly manner, but of course that that she was being veiled, in a room, and they, like I said, they had this fake burial for her, and then it's like she's saying now she's dead, but she's still alive. So she is almost like she was believing the hallucination that she was actually dead, because she would live a life where she would actually be inspired by literature, like I'm reading Pushkin and Lord Byron and Keats, said that romantics, when you look at Keats, especially Lord Byron was, yeah, and Keats. So she's reading all these authors that present some romantic ideals to her, and then she's going out at night, and living this life, on her own, and scaring people as she goes out, and her, how she's perceiving society, how they reject her with her illness, and having, I believe it's, her, her red fingernails and hairy face and pink teeth. That that, and then the way that she's got this stigma because of her illness. Um, but basically that the way I still saw it, though that the story is wanting us to find empathy, because that's not how anyone that has a disease should ever be treated, because we have all the superstition and whatnot going on in the story, especially with the way the family even treats her. And there's a priest there, and then he talks about the great sacrifice she's going to make by having going through this illness. But it's like that they are almost turning her into some sort of, with the white, like the bridal attire, because they know she wasn't going to get married. The sister got married, and with that society and the traditional views that they had to get married and have children to be worthy of being even really in the family even. And so it's like they were having her funeral because that's what those values they cared about that. And so they're pretending as though she's dead because she has the disease. She's not going to live a normal life. She's not going to get married or have children. And so she longs for those things for herself. So we feel really sorry for her. And that's what Atwood, of course, I'm sure is trying to invoke here. But then we do see, similar to the other Araby story, is she struggles with some of the same things that he does in a sense, especially when she looks at her old image of herself. It's like she still is idolizing and worshiping that. And then they keep pictures up around her around the house too. And it's like that image, that's, that she had to have looked that way. Of course, the way she looks now is scary, but it's like that she creates the monster through how she sees herself and that narcissism. And though I haven't found too much on the haven't found too many scholars that actually engaged too much in that aspect of it. So I added some things to the PowerPoint that I was able to kind of see through it, and kind of see as lens that you could possibly view the story. because that she is obsessed with image and her self-image. And then I also connect that to the image of God too, because of the way she sees herself. It's not in that image, and she actually, takes on the persona of a monster. And I just think that's really interesting, and I do connect it to some Cartesian thought as well, because that you can see that as, I believe it's Cartesian thought, and in the John Donne poems there's Cartesian thought. And let me see what other. So I know that there was another. Actually, it was Immanuel Kant, that his cosmology, and the image of God, that the matter of that is kind of connected to Ens realism, Ens realism, realismum versus lusus naturae. And so basically that Ens realismum is the most real being. So that's like the opposite of lusus naturae. But with Immanuel Kant, that his inquiry into who God is separate from the image also. So there's still some ironical connections there, yet they're two totally different concepts. And so I just found that to be, a fascinating connection to that. But in general, though, in a scholarship, you're going to find a lot of scholars that just really focus on the fact that, we should be empathetic towards those that are different because of the concept of otherness. There's some other philosophical concepts I put into about deontology. We'll talk about more of this later. But essentially that, it's just, like I said, there's a lot of superstition in it, and especially tied to traditional values and how she was treated because of those things. And then in the end, of course, she finds another man that she thinks is similar to her, but then that gets her into trouble. And basically that, she fantasizes about ending her life and all of this, and it just all ties back to that concept of herself. And she does talk some about the angels, and though she had this angelic appearance before, like I said, it's all, you see that the surface layer is, it seems to be a lot of it is just fixated on that image rather than who she is as a person. And that's where her disconnect with her identity is, and the need to actually find herself. And that's why I kind of connected the narcissism to it. That's something that I found reading it. And that's just that. Those are some overviews of the both of all three texts. Do y'all have any questions about the stories? Or is there anything that y'all found that you thought was interesting in any of the stories?
Well, it took me a minute to process the I forgot how to say the second word,
Lucis,
but
I think it's lusus naturae. I could be. I may need to listen to someone else say it too, actually, but it is a Latin word.
yes, ma'am. Well, I was confused. I'm like, so is she actually dead, or are they convincing her?
Yeah, they were just trying to convince her that because it's like her life was over. So when I read it too, I was thinking that, I was thinking she was dead, but no, her life, she's still alive. It's just that it was like the way the family is treating her is like she's already passed away, that they had this basically a fake funeral for her. They told everyone that she had died, but she's ended up just living her life, roaming around at night when no one could see her. But in her mind, it's like she had convinced herself that she was dead, especially because of how she looked too. That it's like when she looked at her image, that she didn't see anything remotely similar to that image of perfection and the angelic image that she once had. And that's why I said, well, the way that she sees herself kind of just creates the monster, and the way the family saw her, and the fact that she wasn't going to be able to be like her sister and go on and get married and have children. And in the end, that she even disrupts, I think, her sister and her family too. And then all the townspeople are basically coming after her in the end. And it's kind of like this fatalism here that she's just fantasizing about jumping off the roof, I believe, or I believe that's what she's going to do. That's what she hasn't done it, but how she's thinking about that, because there's really the townspeople are coming after her because they know there's like been like a monster out. And after that, she had that encounter with that man. There's a man and a daughter that seemed to act strange like she did. And so she kind of connected with them. But then that got the awareness of the townspeople. And then, after she tried to kiss him, then that caused a disruption. And then the townspeople were coming after her in the end. So basically, that they were going to, it was not going to be a good ending.
Wow.
Yeah, so I know that was definitely it's a really different story. But I would just say that that the pages 260 to 260 that she's still alive. It's just it's a like she is basically convincing herself though it's like she is dead because she's only going out at night. And that her family members, some of them are passing away, that leave her father and her grandmother pass away. And I think her mother's also sick too. So like her family is actually not doing well, but she is still alive. And her sister though has gone on to having, because that's what they, when they put the white veils on her and everything, it's because like they're saying, because she wasn't going to live a normal life because she had the illness. That's like she was dead, so to speak. And so they just kept her in that room. And then eventually she went to another room. And then that's when she would just leave the house at night. And then she would scare people out in the society. And it focuses a lot on her reaction to their cruelty too. Does that answer your question, or do you have any more questions, Ava?
I do have another one about Araby. Is that quiz like a one-time like try, or can we retake it?
Yeah, you can retake it. So all the quizzes and even like the midterm or the final. The midterm, I know I put 25 questions, and the final, I may put like one or two questions because the two authors I added are not on that, but I think it was like around 40 questions. But it's multiple choice mostly, and you can retake even the final. You can retake that as many times as you want to help your score, because the emphasis in the class is the writing. So even if you don't do well, you can always retake it as many times as you want to raise your score.
Yes, ma'am. When I went to retry the quiz, it said like I couldn't take it again.
Okay, thank you for letting me know that. So I will fix it. Anytime you see that, I'm sorry that this quiz that I had, we changed textbooks last year, so it was a quiz I made last year. So I will, when it got transferred, this is the first time I tried to transfer information from a class. I usually just reposted it each time. But yeah, I didn't have multiple attempts. Have you seen any? I'll check the grammar quiz too. So now it says multiple attempts. So anytime you see that, just let me know and I will fix it, because you should be able to take anything as many times as you want to of the quizzes. Like I said, because the main purpose really of the class is the writing part of it. The quizzes are just to make sure that you're doing the readings and you're doing a good grammar review too. And let me we'll make sure about the grammar quiz too, if that's multiple attempts. Yeah, the grammar quiz says you can take it. I'm sorry about that. Thank you for letting me know that.
You're welcome.
Is there any other questions that y'all have about the readings or assignments?
I don't have it. And just oh wait, that's me talking. Sorry, I heard somebody. But so we do still have the two writing assignments this week.
So this week, what I decided to do, I just fixed one class. So I'm gonna, if you're in the other, because I have 3 sections, I will fix it. But you also have the Araby sense perception assignment, and the quiz on Araby, and the grammar quiz. And then next week, I realized that I had actually put the due date for the birthmark one for next week, the 8th. So you can go ahead and work on that and just go ahead and get it done, but you don't have to turn that in this week if you don't want to. So that'll be moved. There's a paragraph assignment on Lucis Naturae, and then the Araby one. No, sorry, the Araby one is this week. The birthmark and Lucis Naturae, those will be due next week. So I moved that to so the one on Lucis Naturae, the paragraph will be due the 7th, and then the one on the birthmark will be due the 8th. And the discussion for this week is on birthmark. And then there's the paragraph assignment on Araby.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm going to be sure to fix, because you found that, I'm going to change that for the other classes too, so that it's all the same. And I did post an extra video in the module too on Lucis Naturae, just scholars talking about it. If that might help, when you are reading it. And so let's see. It says that this was actually it says that it was actually written in 2004. So that's definitely a newer work, that Lucis Naturae by Margaret Atwood. She's in the literary canon of authors too. She's a well-known American author, so that's why I added her story. Another famous one is Toni Morrison. I did not add one of her stories to it, but and she's another one that is a well-known author too. But yes, so for this week it's just the Araby paragraph, the grammar quiz, and the discussion on birthmark, and the quiz on Araby.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll be glad to help you. And I hope that you'll have a great weekend, a great week and a good weekend too. And I will see y'all next week. So next week I'll just go over and we'll go over the module for week 5. I'll probably go ahead and start to go over the paper assignment, so you can be thinking about that too. And that's already posted in one of the modules. It may be week 5's module that it has that, but it's not going to be due until the 17th. The visual analysis, we'll do that, and then we'll just go over the birthmark in more detail and the Margaret Atwood story, and then we'll go over the assignments too. And I hope y'all have a good day. And like I said, if you have any questions, just let me know. And thank you so much for your diligence. And I will see y'all next Tuesday.
Yes, ma'am. Have a good week.